Hey, this is Mike Robbins. Thanks for joining me for this episode of the podcast. Whew, I hope you're hanging in there. You, your family, your team, everyone around you. As I'm recording this, it's 6:30 in the morning Pacific time on Wednesday, November the 6th. We had a presidential election here in the US yesterday, and Donald Trump has been reelected as the president of the United States. So I hesitated as to whether or not I wanted to record this episode or this video. Um, it's still fresh, it's still raw. I was up late until almost 1 in the morning, and I only slept a few hours last night. So I want to share some of my thoughts initially about it, and more than about the election specifically, but like how we can show up and move forward. And in some way, if it's even possible, how we come together. This podcast is called We're All in This Together. I've had this show since the middle of 2016. Um, those of you who've been listening to this show or following me in my work for many years know I'm not a political pundit. I don't talk a lot about politics. Um, Not that I'm not interested or passionate about it. I feel like I'm a very engaged citizen, and what's happening politically, socially matters a lot to me and always has. I got my degree at Stanford in American Studies with a specialization in race and ethnicity. And so, um, but when Donald Trump got elected 8 years ago, like many people, I was shocked. I did not vote for him then. I did not vote for him in 2020. I did not vote for him in this election. Um, And I started talking a little bit more about what was happening politically and socially here on this show and in my work, more from the perspective of as a human, as someone who has studied and written about and spoken about leadership and authenticity and appreciation and compassion and self-awareness and communication and connection and trust for, much of my adult life. I'm 50 years old now. I started doing this work when I was 26. This is my life. This is my passion. This is what I do. So as I reflect here again, whenever you're listening to this or watching this, especially if it's right now or very recent after this posts, there will be lots of podcasts and videos and articles written and takes that people have from across the political spectrum from here in the US and around the world, with people having their thoughts and their feelings and their reactions to what happened. Um, I would say that I'm feeling shocked. I'm feeling sad. I'm feeling angry. I'm feeling confused. I'm feeling scared, um, disoriented. It's not that I didn't think it was possible that he could win. I mean, we knew from all the polls it looked close. I mean, I guess there were like four scenarios, right? Kamala Harris could have won barely. Donald Trump could have won barely. Kamala Harris could have won, in a big way significantly, or Donald Trump could have won in a big way significantly. And that's the scenario that looks like what played out is him winning big. I mean, right now, as I'm recording this, he has 277 electoral votes. They haven't called Nevada, Michigan, and Arizona, but he's up in all three, and it's probable that he'll win all three of those. He's got over 71 million total votes, and that's 5 million more than she has. When it's all said and done, it probably won't be that significant of a difference in the popular vote, but it sounds like he's going to win the popular vote for the first time in all three times that he's run. So this is a very different election than the last two. Um, so again, I don't really want to get too much into the election. There are people way smarter than me and way more qualified than me to talk about the political aspect. I want to talk more about the social emotional aspect of this. Um, Look, there's over 70 million people in our country, who voted for Donald Trump. Even after everything he did and said when he ran the first time, everything that happened while he was president the first time, everything that happened when he lost the election last time, and January 6th, and all the things and everything that he's done and said since he left the White House and over the course of the last few years and then few months of this campaign. Like, we know this guy. He was our president before, and it looks like now he's going to be our president again. So people said yes to that. It's obviously been a really challenging time over the last many years with, you know, the pandemic, with economic challenges and inflation and all the things. So anyway, that's what happened. There are millions and millions and millions of people today waking up who voted for Donald Trump, who are probably happy, maybe some ecstatic that he won. And then there's millions of people, again, as it stands right now, Kamala Harris has, as I'm recording this, over 66 million votes, including mine, including Michelle's, including, our 18-year-old daughter, Samantha, who voted for the first time. And many of us who voted for Kamala Harris are feeling, a lot of the same emotions that I'm feeling. Um, we know we're a divided country. We've been a divided country for a long time. So the question is today, as I'm recording this, as we're all processing this, in the coming days, in the coming weeks, how do we show up individually? How do we navigate this? Whether you're devastated by the result or you're excited about the result. My assumption is the vast majority of you listening to me and watching me right now, if you follow me and my work, again, I'm not political, but I've been pretty open and honest with you about where I stand politically. My politics have always been to the left, quite far to the left. I grew up in Oakland, California, very proudly, where Kamala Harris was born. I was raised by a single mom who was a feminist before her time, who was born in 1938 on the East Coast. And, um, I'm proud to be a liberal progressive in my way of thinking, in my way of operating, in my way of voting. I don't apologize for that in any way, shape, or form. And again, my life and my work and my career has been a lot focused on how do we come together? How do we find common ground? How do we remember that we're all in this together? Because I truly believe that, even and especially in a moment like this, where I'm mindful of the fact that many people are deeply, deeply disheartened and concerned and potentially terrified or outraged by this election result. And I think about, immigrants and people of color and members of the LGBTQ community, especially people in the trans community. I think about so many people. I think about all the women. I haven't even really had a chance yet to fully debrief with Michelle or Samantha or Rosie, the three most important people in my life, all of whom are female, and what this means for them, both in terms of the policies that have been proposed by each of the candidates and what may come as we move into the future, but also the idea that this man won again, and the two times that he's won, he's beaten a woman, and it's not just about their gender, but there are a lot of things when you look at both the election in 2016 and this election in 2024 on paper. Both of these women who ran were incredibly qualified. And, I think Kamala Harris ran an incredible campaign, as weird as it was with President Biden stepping aside and all the things that have happened over the last 3-4 months politically and everything else. So I think it's important for us as best as we can to try to be mindful and sensitive of everybody's experience right now. Whether, again, you're super excited or terrified, whether you think this is a good thing or a bad thing. I mean, as much as we do know, because we've been through it one time before with him getting elected in a way that was somewhat surprising and shocking, and then the nature of how that presidency played out. Um, we don't know what the future holds. We never know. Um, but we all have been through a lot. And I think there's a level of tiredness and weariness that many of us have across the spectrum. I mean, one thing I will say, and I'm super passionate about this, and I want to be talking about this in the coming days and weeks and months and years, especially, even more so, even more overtly, is how do we come together and find common ground? One thing that I've noticed, especially in the last few years, as I've been traveling around the country, and look, we've been divided as a country for a long time. This is not just a Donald Trump phenomenon. I mean, I do think that his election in 2016 and the way that he talks and approaches things, and I personally feel like it's exacerbated the divisiveness and thrown gasoline on the fire. But like, there's a lot of factors at play, not the least of which is even the device that you're listening to or watching this on, or the platform, um, that have created this level of divisiveness in our country. Um, but it seems to me there's one specific thing that I can see as I look, I travel around the US and have for the last 24 years in lots of different places in the country. I travel internationally as well. But it does seem to be a pretty universal phenomenon right now across the political spectrum, whether I'm here in the Bay Area, which tends to be much more liberal and progressive, or if I'm in Texas or Florida or, North Carolina or wherever I might be, on the East Coast or in the Midwest. There seems to be a sense that this divisiveness is not healthy, is not good, is not who we are, and isn't what we want. Now, people have different opinions about who's to blame for it, or what the source of it is, or who needs to change, or this or that, or I mean, but I think most of us would agree it doesn't feel good, and we don't want to live in a country where people are yelling and screaming at each other all the time. And both sides of the political spectrum are convinced the other side is ruining the country and taking us in a direction that's ultimately going to be catastrophic. And again, as I sit here today, disappointed and shocked by the outcome of the election, scared about what the future holds, I want to be mindful of that, even as I think about how I process it and how we process it together. And again, I don't want to, I was scared to even record this. And there's a part of me, even as I'm saying this to you, in the back of my mind, it's like, should I even post this? Is this going to be helpful? Are people going to get pissed? Are people going to have judgments and tell me I'm, you know, too pie in the sky, or I'm too liberal and woke, or I'm too unaware of this, or I'm, you know, a privileged white guy who doesn't get it, or I mean, all the different things that are possible reactions to what I'm saying right now. I can't control that. I'm just trying to be real. My work is about authenticity. My work is about how do we show up and how do we come together. And in this case, I want to talk about some things that I've been thinking about just this morning. And again, I'm on like 3 hours sleep. I'm still processing this. There's still an element of, almost not denial, but just like, is this really happening? But I wanted to share it while I was fresh. And I also want to be able to engage in a conversation about how do we address this moment individually and collectively? How do we move through it? And then how do we move forward? Because I don't like how divisive things have been. It doesn't feel healthy and productive. It doesn't feel sustainable. And there's going to be a lot of people on the political left, myself included, who are going to feel really strongly that like we have to fight and we have to resist and we have to stand up and we have to protect and we have to push back. And there's a lot of vulnerable people and vulnerable groups right now waking up this morning terrified about what the future holds and what a second Donald Trump term will look like. I get that to the degree that I can. I don't know what it's like to be anything but a 50-year-old heterosexual man who grew up in California and lives where I live and does what I do and has the family that I have. And that's all I know. And as open-minded as I try to be and as aware as I try to be of other people's experiences, I don't know what it's like to be you. Even if you and I are the same age and race and gender and orientation and background and grew up in the same town. I just had a conversation with my friend Asa, who I've known since eighth grade, and we talk all the time. And we grew up in Oakland together, and we went to junior high and high school together. Like he and I, He lives on the East Coast now, but we have very different experiences, even though we have a lot of similarities on paper and we know each other really well. But especially when you add multiple layers of difference, people are reacting very differently to this. So, what can we do? I jotted down a few thoughts as I was walking this morning and as I've been meditating on this of things that I'm going to try to focus on myself. And I want to offer to you as possibilities of things that you might be able to focus on in the coming days and weeks and months in how you show up to meet this moment and how we move through this and move forward together as best as we can. I think the first thing we got to do is be real. Look, if you're upset about this in the way that I am, if you're scared, if you feel scared or angry or sad or confused or disoriented, that's real. And that's a completely appropriate response. If you feel happy and joyful and grateful and excited and like that too is an approach, whatever your response is, there's no right way to respond to this. And I think there's a tendency to either over dramatize things at times in life or to do what we sometimes call the spiritual bypass and immediately go to the higher ground. I think it's important for each and every one of us in our own way to be real. And this is a big deal. This has significant impact. For better or worse, like our lives are inundated with so much, with our phones and with media and with even if you're someone who doesn't really pay attention to politics for a bunch of reasons, like you can't get away from it. It's everywhere and it's so in our face in our society for better or worse. And it's going to be easy to react and to move into our spaces and our tribal spaces as we do, if you will. But I think the first thing we can do is just be real with our feelings. How are you genuinely feeling about this? I genuinely have a lot of fear and sadness and anger and confusion right now. I do. And that may continue, that may increase, that may decrease, but I don't want to sugarcoat it or pretend like it's not there. It's very real for me. It's palpable. It's again, it feels um, like a significant loss for me personally, and millions and millions of other people here in this country, and tens of, if not hundreds of millions of people around the world, I would imagine. And again, that's not in any way to invalidate people who don't feel that way, but that's how I feel. And I think that's how a lot of us feel, but we got to be real with ourselves. And there's a tendency, I think, when we feel things strongly and deeply because it's hard, we want to escape or we want to push it out. So we blame other people, we lash out at other people. And that does happen, that will happen. The more that we can be real about how we feel, the healthier I think it'll be for us. The second thing I think we can do, is just really allow ourselves to grieve if we're grieving. That's like related to feeling what we feel and to be honest about it. And if we are, again, I'm assuming the vast majority of people listening to me, watching me right now, just sort of given the way the algorithm works and who's drawn to what and just the nature of my work and everything, my assumption is there's not a ton of people listening to me and watching this right now that are celebrating, but maybe you are. Or maybe you're thinking, hey, this might not be as bad, or I voted for Donald Trump, or I'm hopeful that whatever it is. My hope is that the celebrating can be done graciously. One of the things that I think was really hard about 2016 for me being as shocked and scared and sad as I was when that happened is it felt like a lot of people who voted for Donald Trump and when he won were still really angry. And there was like this angry winner syndrome of like, yeah, in your face. And, what, and not to say that there people in life, we do this, we gloat sometimes. It's part of the human experience. But my hope, my prayer is that if you're someone who's on the side of like, this is what you wanted, that there can be a level of graciousness in the victory, in the winning. I would be saying this, by the way, if it had gone the other way, probably even more intensely, even more loudly to my liberal and progressive friends. So can we allow ourselves to grieve, allow ourselves to feel, be real about it? And if we are in that space of celebrating or thinking that it's good, just give people space, right? celebrate graciously if that's possible. Um, Another thing that I think is really important for us to do today and in the coming days and in the coming weeks is like take care of yourself. Maybe we put our phones down a bit. Maybe we turn off the news. Stay informed as best as you can and need to, but like do what you need to do to take care of yourself, to rest, to hydrate, to sleep. I mean, in some ways, again, it's like we've been through a lot. A lot of people I know and talk to are exhausted right now, not just from the campaign and the political, but like, my goodness. Again, I feel like collectively we're doing a bit better than we were, say, a few years ago as we were in the throes of the pandemic. But it still feels to me like we're not playing with a full deck mentally, emotionally. It's been a really intense time over many, many years. And again, for those of us on the political left or people who didn't vote for Donald Trump are very upset about this. And that runs the gamut, by the way. It's not just people on the left, it's a lot of people. But, it was 4 years of Donald Trump being president and a lot of chaos and a lot of outrage and a lot of worry and a lot of constantly feeling like all of that, well, 3 years, I guess, and then leading into the pandemic, which was so challenging and upsetting and scary and disruptive and all the things that it was for all of us. And then that lasted for, we had another election in the middle of it that was pretty gnarly and divisive. And then coming out of that, it was like we finally made our way through the pandemic. And then right as we were coming out of COVID, really, especially here in California and other places that were really impacted in terms of shutdowns and all of that, it was like that's right when inflation spiked and things got much more challenging economically. And now we've been in a tumultuous political season, unprecedented, and now just an election that is a bit shocking in the ultimate result. Again, Donald Trump winning and winning big wasn't on most people's bingo cards. I think even the people who thought he might win and wanted him to win, again, probably less shocking than it was in 2016, just given the polls and what all the experts were saying. But this, and especially the way it was breaking in the last few days and what all the experts and again the polls were saying, it seemed like what was more likely was a narrow win by Kamala Harris, possibly even a big win by her, maybe a narrow win by Donald Trump, but the big win by Donald Trump, definitely not expected. So with all of that and with all the emotion around it and everything and all the sensitivity of it and the unknown and fear involved and everything and the way the rhetoric has been so intense, especially let's coming from him, and I mean, it's just, again, it's hard to fathom, but can we take care of ourselves? Can we nurture ourselves? Another thing I think is important for us to do is reach out to other people, people we love, people we care about, people who might maybe have some different perspective than us. But right now, reach out to people that feel safe, that feel nurturing, that feel like we can be ourselves and we can be real with, um, and that are going to nourish us, that are going to care for us, that are going to have our backs, that are going to remind us that we're loved, and that in this moment, even with the fear of what might come next, if you're feeling scared, right now, right here, right now, as you watch this or listen to this, whether it's the day after the election as I'm recording it, or a couple days after, or a couple weeks after, or even if you're for some reason listening to this weeks and months and years later, although I imagine this won't age well and you probably don't want to revisit this necessarily. Um, right here in this moment, I'm okay, you're okay, like we're safe, we're healthy, like, right? And sometimes when things get really scary outside of me, I try to just breathe and remember, okay, I'm okay right now. I'm safe right now. And then if we reach out to people that we love and people that we know, that can make a difference. Like I just had that conversation with my friend Asa. It made a difference to connect with my dear friend and to talk about how I was feeling. Maybe it's a friend, spouse, colleague, coworker, maybe it's a therapist, a coach, but just like reach out to the people. And I think if you're someone in the situation where you feel good about or happy about or not as freaked out about this election result as an example, and some people who do, maybe you can reach out to them. If you're feeling really, really scared about it, maybe you can reach out to some people that your sense is they're not feeling as scared, but that we really can have each other's backs. Remember that we're in this together. First and foremost in our lives, in our families, with our teams, with the people closest to us, but also in our communities. I mean, I will say again, without trying to sound trite or corny or cliched about it, even as divided as the country is, even as intense as things have been, even as upset and concerned as I've been at many times over the last decade, I do believe in the goodness of humans, even with all the questions and reactions and judgments that I have about how could this happen and how could we reelect this man given what he's done and what he said and all the things. I still choose to believe that people are good at their core and that in our country, as imperfect as our country is, we are in this together. We do actually care about each other. And when push comes to shove, and there's a hurricane or there's a fire or there's something going on, or as a friend of mine likes to say, when you walk through a cemetery, it doesn't usually say on the tombstone, Democrat or Republican. It just says, this is this person's name and this is when they were born and when they died. And like, I believe that even as upset, disappointed, scared, and angry as I feel right now. So can we reach out to people, especially today, tomorrow, in the coming days, like safe people, healthy people, supportive people, loving people? It's probably not the best time to like start arguing with the people around you and the people that you're mad at. And, again, even if that, I'm not saying that we don't need to have some sweaty palm conversations. Of course we do always. But, you know, blaming people and yelling at people and understandable, just probably not the most healthy and effective at this moment. And then the final thing that I'll say at the moment, and I'm sure I'm going to have lots of other thoughts about this in the coming days and weeks and months, and as we move through this whole next phase of whatever comes next, I think it's important for us not to give our power away as much as we possibly can. Look, I'm aware of the fact that some of us have more privilege than others. Some of us are more vulnerable to some of the things that may change in this country as a result of this election. I do not want in any way, shape, or form to minimize that, sugarcoat that, or pretend like, first of all, I don't know exactly what's going to happen. And again, my own bias and my own privilege and my worldview is such that, like, there are certain things that I don't have to think about and worry about for myself that other people don't have the same privilege to do. So I get that. And at the end of the day, like Eleanor Roosevelt said, right? No one has the power to make me feel inferior without my permission. I will reflect on when Donald Trump was president the first time, I gave a lot of my power away to him and to the things that would upset me or outrage me or piss me off or offend me or the stuff I did. He said what? He did what? And I just would, you know, our girls who were now 18 and 16 when Donald Trump got elected 8 years ago, right? They were 8 and 6, or no, they were, what were they? 10 and 8. Sorry, it's early. I haven't slept much. I'm not doing great math in my head, right? 8 years ago, 10 and 8. But over the 4 years that Trump was in the White House the first time, we would have friends come over for dinner. And I remember Samantha saying to me at one point, she was probably 12 years old, "Hey, Dad, can you guys not talk about Donald Trump tonight? I don't want, it was like she didn't like the energy of the conversation because what would often happen is we'd get together with friends, we'd be talking about life and things and whatever. And what would come up was like, can you believe he said this? Can you believe? And then we would just like, all of a sudden, the conversation was hijacked and we were off and running with, and I didn't think that what we were saying in any way was wrong or crazy and it was understandable and all the things that it was. But I feel like I let what was happening in Washington, what he was saying, what he was doing, hijack me in a way that's like wasn't productive, wasn't healthy for my life. And I'm not saying it's not important to get involved. I'm not saying it's not important to engage and to vote and to advocate and to give money and to volunteer and to do all the things that we need to do. There's going to be lots of time for action and lots of opportunity for action in the coming days, weeks, months, once the new administration takes over in Washington. And I don't know what that all is going to entail. And again, I'm not pretending like I know. I'm not a prognosticator in that case. I'm not a, political analyst. But I do know on a human level, we can stay engaged, we can stay informed, we can be active, conscious citizens without giving away our power. Now, again, you might listen to this and say, my power is going to be taken from me, or my freedoms or my rights are going to be taken from me, or some already have, and I'm afraid some more will. I get that. I don't know what's going to happen on all of those fronts. And again, some of us are safer than others, but on a daily basis, right now, today, as you listen to this or watch this, tomorrow, in the coming days, like we get to choose where we put our attention. We get to choose what we focus on, what we talk about, what we think about, what we worry about to some degree. And there's really only two things in life that we can control: our attitude, right? Our mindset, our approach, and our effort, our actions, our behaviors. And you've heard me say many, many times on this podcast, and I say this when I speak, two of the things that I say over and over and over again that to me feel so apropos to this moment. And I say this with respect and understanding of how significant this moment is. But one thing is the quote from Byron Katie that I use all the time. She says, when you argue with reality, you lose, but only 100% of the time. This is the reality. I don't like this reality. I didn't want this reality. I didn't vote for this reality. This is not what I think is the best reality. I am concerned about this reality. I wish this wasn't the reality, and it is. So I don't want to waste a lot of time and energy arguing with the reality. I want to, again, be real about how I feel. I want to allow myself to grieve and go through the stages of grief and really be genuine in that process, in that experience. I want to take care of myself as best as I can. I want to reach out to the people that I love and that I know and lean on them and see if they can lean on me. And I want to check in with people, maybe even eventually some people that I disagree with and some people who aren't as scared or upset as I am, and maybe get some healthy perspective from them as to why maybe they're not as scared or why they voted the way that they did, so that I can more deeply understand. And I also want to make sure that I'm not giving away my power, because while the president of the United States has significant impact on all of us and in the world, clearly, ultimately, you and I get to choose how we show up. We get to choose what we say, what we do, what we focus on, the actions that we take, the attitudes that we have, right? And the other thing you've heard me say many times is, this notion of, why is this happening to me, or why is this happening to us? It makes sense when things happen that we don't understand. I've had that thought already about, why did this happen again? Why did this happen to us again? I don't understand. This doesn't make sense. It doesn't add up. I don't like it. I don't, all the things. But if we change the word to the word for, it doesn't magically make the situation better. It doesn't change the circumstance. But if we say, why is this happening for me? Or why is this happening for us? It just puts us in a different position where we can look at it differently. What's the opportunity here? How can this make us better, stronger, more resilient? How might we be able to grow and change and heal and really ultimately have the kind of country and the kind of world that we want? Yes, for many of us, myself included, this feels like a major step backwards, and it's scary. And that is real. And ultimately, here we are. We've made it through 100% of the challenges we've ever faced, individually and collectively, up to this point, until we don't. And one of the things that I've done over the course of my life, and I sometimes encourage other people to do, and I'll close with this, is that if you make a list of some of the biggest challenges you've made your way through, personally and collectively, while that can be a little bit negative or maybe even traumatizing to revisit those things, but unless those things are currently happening, what you'll be reminded of is how resilient you are and how resilient we are. And even in the face of the fear or the sadness or the anger or the shock or the disorientation, or possibly even very different reactions and emotions that are more positive as we would think of them, you and I are incredibly strong, resilient people, as are the people around us who we work with, who we live with, as are our fellow citizens, as is this big, messy, imperfect country that we live in, as is the world. If you're listening to and watching this from somewhere else in the world, like, we've been through a lot and we will continue to go through a lot. And I think we will make our way through this. But we ultimately get to say how we show up, how we engage in the challenges and opportunities that are presented in front of us. And we have the possibility to move forward together in some way that ultimately benefits us. I don't know what that means at this moment. I don't know how that looks. I'm feeling, tired and weary and pretty raw at the moment, but I wanted to come on and share some of this with you. I hope you found this in some way useful. I'm still not 100% sure I'm even going to post this, but I think that I will. I may be sharing more about this in the coming days or weeks or months. I don't know. I'm just going to see what unfolds and what feels right for me to talk about. But feel free to reach out to me, or if you're watching this on YouTube, you can leave a comment or connect with me on social media or through our website, mike-robbins.com. Look, I know I say this a lot because it's the title of my book and the name of this podcast, but I truly believe we are all in this together. So let's be well as best as we can, and step by step, moment by moment, have each other's backs as we make our way through this. Until next time, we're in it together.